Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So I recently did a poll to ask you guys what you wanted to see more of, Series 3 content or more Series 4 and Series 5 content, and a huge majority of you guys said that Series 3 was what you want to see more because that's what you're able to build. And so I am still going to experiment with the new cards, but I am going to shift my focus more on what is a little bit more accessible for everybody to build, but still remaining as competitive as I can within those restraints. And so today we have a blast from the past. Last season, this deck was all over the meta. This was something that you saw probably in 10 games, you probably saw it 6 or 7 times because it was incredibly consistent. There wasn't really a lot out there that really competed very well with this list. And at the start of the season, we saw it kind of die off just because of all of the new cards that were introduced, all of the new really strong play lines. The Leech leader meta kind of hurt this one a little bit, mainly the Leech portion, especially if it came down early. But what really hurt it was combo decks that really focused on pushing extra power into those lanes after the initial play, making a Professor X lockdown a little bit more difficult, making it harder for you to maneuver. But the biggest reason that this fell out was that it was incredibly transparent. Since this was such a common deck, everybody knew how to play against it, everybody had a counterplay to it. But it has been a little bit over a month, and this deck is very rarely seen anymore. I would assume that a lot of people that are currently playing weren't around at the time or just weren't very far in their collection to really know or identify what this list is. And so it is a Spectrum Destroyer list. It is a very versatile and flexible list. The goal is to always have one of your in-game plays, whether it be your Spectrum or your Destroyer, and then set up your plays around having that last turn play. The opponent also will likely know that you have one of the two, then they're going to have to shift their plays around that potential play line that you have. And so sometimes even if you don't have it, you can bluff them out of cubes, but overall this deck is very consistent. It can fold to certain decks that either move your cards around the board, maybe they run an Enchantress and they hit your Professor X as soon as it's dropped because you had priority, or maybe they get their high roll and they just outpower you. But otherwise, this list is incredibly consistent. It is very middle of the line, so it's always going to do fairly well. Sometimes you won't draw into either one of your in-game resources and then you'll have to back out. But for the most part, it does what it wants to do very well. It is very true to what it can do, and that power level, that ceiling and the floor are not very discrepant. It is always going to be a pretty good game, but you're never going to have a 1000 power lane, which is okay, especially if you're looking to climb. Having something that can perform consistently can help avoid tilting, can help avoid getting frustrated with some surprise losses or kind of overreading your hand, because you're always going to be able to calculate exactly what power push you're going to be able to do with this list. And so we're going to go ahead and jump over into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, next up we have Bob Spitterman. The first location is the sewer system, so every card there is going to have -1. I'm going to go ahead and play Ant-Man blindly into the far right lane. We do have our Colossus that we could stack there. Limitless could be decent, but it could also be bad for us. We do have Destroyer. We also have our Warpath, our Professor X, so we can lock down one of the lanes and then lean in with a Destroyer playline. I'm going to go ahead and play our Lizard. Next turn, we can go with a Colossus into any of the locations. It doesn't matter where we play it, because when Destroyer comes down, he's not going to destroy the Colossus playline. And then we do have Professor X to lock down and save this location, depending on what kind of deck they're running. Now, they did snap, so they are confident in whatever it is that they have. I'm going to go ahead and go with our Colossus into the sewer system. We're okay. We don't necessarily need it to survive. And so our Colossus comes down. They have a Captain America as well, so maybe they're running a very similar list to us. As long as they don't have the Destroyer or a Professor X somewhere that kind of takes us by surprise, then I think we're okay. We don't have the Spectrum buff, but we do have the Destroyer, which is one of the two consistent in-game triggers that we have. And so they do play their third card into Limitless. I think this is going to be a competition. I think they're going to have this location won. I think we're going to have Atlantis locked down, but I think we will win in the sewer system because we're going to be able to do our Destroyer and we'll have some additional power there after the fact. And so I'm actually okay with this. We're going to snap back and wait to see what they play. All right, so they do play 2 cards, one into Lamentus and then a Cosmo into the sewer system. Interesting. And so now a Destroyer play is not going to trigger, and we should be able to have them outpowered. So if they do a Destroyer here, then we have them outpowered by 1 because of the Colossus play. If they go with something else, if they go with the Spectrum, it's not going to trigger. I think we have the easy win here. And there comes the retreat. So again, this list, it doesn't have that surprise factor anymore because it is very commonly, or because it was very commonly ran. And this looks like a mirror match, but we will take the 4 cubes where we can. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Safety Blade. And if you don't know Safety Blade, they do a lot of kind of build requests. They do some work for Marvel Snap Zone, and they're very active on Twitter. I'll leave a link to their Twitter in the description below. But they're always coming up with various different lists for the different locations, different new cards, things like that. So if you haven't seen anything from by Safety Blade, definitely check them out. So the first location is Grand Central. We did play our Ant-Man there. I'm going to go ahead and play Lizard to follow it up. And then I think we start stacking into the hub, depending on what cards we draw into. So we don't have either of our in-game play lines just yet. And so we do need to... Ooh, so they use a Black Widow into the Black Cat discard. So maybe this is the Helicarrier Hawk build that we had from a couple of days ago. Maybe that's what they're running here. I'm going to go ahead and throw Mr. Fantastic and the Widow's Bite down. Unfortunately, we didn't get to draw. We still need to dig for one of our late game resources or play lines. So they do use Polaris and pull our Ant-Man over, so that does disrupt the consistency of the deck just a little bit. A Warpath's not going to be anywhere near as valuable now. But I am going to go ahead and play Warpath into Grand Central. We just have our junk spread all throughout the board. But, oh... They send us a Green Goblin, they send us a Hood. So maybe they're just running a junk deck instead that ran a Black Cat, which is kind of surprising. I'm going to go ahead and do Cosmo and Mojo. Oh no. We're going to skip here. We could do both Cosmo and Mojo, but we want to increase the chance that this does not pull into our Destroyer. Anything else but our Destroyer is fine, but if we play both of those, they have a 50-50 shot. There's a 50-50 shot that our Destroyer pulls in, and that is definitely not ideal. So we are locked out of the Avengers compound location. A Viper gets pulled in, it sends us their Black Widow. We are winning here currently. This is a pretty big play line. If we had a Claw, we could push a little bit of extra power over here, but it's not enough. I don't know that we find our win. I'm going to go ahead and play our Spectrum, but I don't know that we hold the win in this lane because it's only going to be a 7 power push into the hub location. And then we've lost to the Spider-Man play in the Avengers compound, unfortunately. We are getting probably beaten with our own deck. Ooh, so they play 2 cards into the Grand Central location. And so one is a Spider-Woman, which does hurt our cards a little bit, and then the Demon, but the Spectrum is just enough to hold on. Incredibly close game. Had they pushed those resources into the hub instead, they would have won. Went for the bigger or guaranteed power level lane, and luckily we were able to hold it down. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Mozik or Mozik. The first location is Kamar Taj. So if we draw into our Spectrum, that's almost a guaranteed win. Shuri's Lab actually is tough. If they have a Shuri and then into Shuri's Lab, that could be pretty rough. I think we do maybe invest a few resources into Shuri's Lab. Maybe we can find a way to lock it down with a Professor X. 1-5 into a turn 6 Spectrum in Kamar Taj. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what they're playing. It does look like they're running maybe a Mr. Negative, so maybe a Bast deck list. Bast doesn't do incredibly well in Shuri's Lab or locations that double the power just because most of their base power is relatively low. I do want to start stacking power into Kamar Taj because of the double trigger of Spectrum, but I think what we do instead is they ramped up with Psylocke. Either they are running a Galactus deck, or if they're running a Mr. Negative deck, then they have 2 choices of where they want to play Mr. Negative, because they can't play it into Kamar Taj because that will invert it and then invert it again, so then it would be regular. They just look really cool. They could play it into Shuri's Lab, but then that doubles the Mr. Negative's power, and I don't think they want to do that. So in my head, the most likely spot is into Monster Metropolis. And so we're going to play our Cosmo, prohibit them from doing the Mr. Negative, and just like that, we stop some of their power push. It's not going to be all of it, but it is a pretty good portion, I feel, that we were able to stop and that we were able to prohibit. We can do Warpath into Shuri's Lab, but that's going to make it 10 power. It's not going to get the +4 bonus because we will eventually play into the Kamar Taj lane. I think this is a Bast Mr. Negative Silver Surfer list, and so we can expect that to come down. So they do use Forge. The next card that they play is going to be twice as powerful, so I would expect it to be Brood here. But if we do something like Lizard and then Captain America, we could do the double spectrum on the final turn and buff up each of these lanes quite a bit. I'm just torn between where we want to push our Lizard. We could do Lizard here. We could do it here as a way to kind of give us that extra push into the Monster Metropolis lane. We could also Professor X lock down the Camartage location. And I kind of like that play line. It's not as powerful, but if they do a Brood and only a Brood here, then we will have 3 power. We're going to be losing this one by 1, but once the Spectrum comes down into Shuri's lab, the only location that they'll be able to play Silver Surfer is here. They're not going to get as high of a power push. I expect the Brood to come down, so we'll have we'll have Brood and 2 Broodlings. And so it is the 6 power Brood plus the 6 power Broodlings, and so it's a 12 power. That's a huge power push into Shuri's lab. Now they can do a couple of things. They can do 1 3-cost card here plus Silver Surfer. That's going to give them an even bigger lead into Shuri's lab. What else could they do? They could do a Iron Man. They could do Iron Heart. They could do Iron Heart as a way to push more power into Camartage. Oy, I didn't think about that. They would have to do Iron Heart here. So this would only be 24. We're going to have an extra 10. So then we would potentially win this lane. I think we have this one, but an Iron Heart could mess us up just a little bit. I'm going to use Spectrum as a way to push this up to 5. If they don't do anything to buff up this lane, no, they just go with an Iron Man into Shuri's lab to double down on that location. We have the Spectrum that comes down. We have the kind of surprise factor, which shouldn't be a surprise factor, but this has fallen out of the meta. This is now more of a off-meta pick. And we are able to get a big enough buff onto our Professor X so that we win the far left and the far right lane for another 4 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Crush, and the first location is Limbo. So we do have an extra turn in this game. So we don't need to rush our power out onto the board. We want to use it strategically. We want to use it in a way that we can drop our Claw to help support it if we need to. But we also would like to be able to use our Warpath. And so we still need to look for what in-game resource we draw into, either our Spectrum or our Destroyer, to know a little bit better what path we want to take towards the end of the game. I am going to drop Mr. Fantastic just so that they don't know exactly where our power push is going to be. That is going to give us a little bit of a widespread reach. And so then we can invest into any of those lanes depending on what it looks like the opponent is running and what they have. I think we do our Warpath into far right Washington, D.C. We're not going to get the bonus from the Warpath, but I am going to try to bait them into doing a Professor X into the middle location. With the Daredevil, I assume that a Professor X is going to come down, but they just copied our Claw, which is unfortunate. I'm going to go ahead and use Professor X into Washington, D.C. They'll be able to play whatever resources they need. They do have our Claw, so they'll be able to push 6 additional power into that location, if that is what they end up wanting to do. But if we can draw into our Destroyer by turn 7, then we'll be able to play it after we play an armor into whatever lane we actually want to keep, and we can clear up the 3rd location, get the extra 4 from our Warpath, and get a lot more upside as a result as well. Now, and then if they go with a Professor X into this Washington DC lane, we do have our Claw and then potentially a Spectrum as well. And so it does look like that is what they're going to go with, is the Professor X into the Nightcrawler lockdown in this lane, which is rather unfortunate. So they have Claw, they know that we have Claw as well. So they can push 6 extra power. Even if we push 6 and then do a Spectrum, that's only going to give a little bit extra. I think we lean in and we're going to hope. We are going to hope for the Destroyer play. We're hoping to draw the Destroyer. The 1 out of 3 shot of drawing into Destroyer here could give us a way to win. Other than that, I think we lose. I think we're just outpaced too heavily. Oh no, the Spectrum. It is the wrong version. This is not what we wanted to draw into. We're going to try and bluff them though. We're going to snap. We do have Spectrum, but not Destroyer. If they're thinking about the Destroyer play line that we have, could have, that would give us another 18 power into the Limbo lane. But we don't, and Spectrum's not going to trigger because of our Cosmo. They're going to make us play it, aren't they? They're going to wait and see. I have no poker tells. We're hoping for the retreat. The snap was kind of reckless. Normally, I would not. but it does pay off this time around. We could have lost 3 additional cubes versus just the 1 that we had wagered, but we convinced them out of the 1 extra cube. We just had the Spectrum play. That feels bittersweet. It feels good that that paid off, but that was not a good play line. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. Let's go ahead and jump over into one more and try to get a little bit more conventional of a game. All right, next up we have Samsef, and the first location is Xandar. We do have our Ant-Man into our armor, so we are going to lean into that location. Wow, are we getting mirror matches? We're seeing a lot of mirror matches here. So we do get Project Pegasus. So if we draw into Professor X, we don't, unfortunately. So I'm going to lean pretty heavily in to the Xandar location. I'm going to go Warpath and Captain America here. And then we'll start investing our resources into one of the other lanes. They do use the armor for us, thankfully. If they have a Professor X, did they have the Professor X? No, they had a Red Skull. Very interesting. So that's a very big resource that we're not going to be able to really compete with unless we had several cards that we could drop over there and they didn't invest anything additional. Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. They do have initiatives, so the Cosmo play is more defensive than anything into the Project Pegasus. That is if they didn't like wait and then end up dropping like a Taskmaster or something. And so the Cosmo comes down. I think we're going to go with an armor into the middle location. We're going to hold the rock for now, and we're going to wait to see what they play. They do run a Cosmo of their own, so they protect the Red Skull here. So I can only assume that they have another large, big power play. We're going to go ahead and set the Claw into Xandar and look for one of our last turn plays. We won't be able to use a Spectrum very well because the middle and far right locations are both blocked by Cosmo. We can do the Destroyer play, and they skipped, so they could do a She-Hulk and then something else. They could do an Infinite here, and an Infinite would be 20 power. This would actually push to 21, and so they would end up tying us in Xandar. The Destroyer would let us win the Project Pegasus lane by more than they win the Subterranean lane. With the skip, it is a little bit intimidating, but I think the Infinite is what we see here. It could be the She-Hulk. No, it is the Infinite, and we do outpower the Infinite. Not a fantastically traditional game, but it is one that we were able to find our win condition. We are going to take that one. That is game number 5. We're going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you like the more Series 3 focus videos, let me know in the comment section down below. I want to focus on what you guys are able to build and what you guys are going to enjoy seeing the most. And so I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.